One mouse click, one dismissive shrug, and millions of dollars worth of work vanished into digital oblivion. The notification popped up on my screen at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Project files permanently deleted by administrator. My manager stood behind me, coffee in hand, watching my face drain of color. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment, he hadn't just erased my project. He'd written his own professional death warrant. The company would lose $10 million. He would lose everything else. My name is Rachel Donovan, and at 32, I'd clawed my way up from a trailer park in Nebraska to a corner office at Valoris Systems, one of Denver's most prestigious fintech companies. Every morning, I'd arrive at our glass tower downtown before 7, watching the sunrise paint the Rocky Mountains gold while the city slowly awakened below. It was my daily reminder of how far I'd come and how far I still had to climb. Growing up, I learned early that hunger makes you sharp. Not just the physical kind, though there was plenty of that in my childhood, but the deeper hunger for something more. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep our rusted trailer from being repossessed. My father? He'd disappeared when I was 7, leaving behind nothing but empty beer cans and a pile of lottery tickets. While other kids complained about their iPhone models being outdated, I was teaching myself coding on a library computer that crashed every 30 minutes. That hunger drove me through state college on scholarships and stolen hours of sleep. It pushed me through unpaid internships where I fetched coffee for men who couldn't remember my name, but somehow never forgot to stare at my legs. It carried me through my first real job, where I discovered that being twice as good meant getting half the credit, especially when you're a woman in tech. Valoris Systems was supposed to be different. The recruiter had smiled warmly, talking about diversity initiatives and equal opportunity advancement. The salary offer made my hands shake, more money than my mother had ever seen in 5 years combined. I accepted immediately, believing I'd finally found a place where merit mattered more than golf club memberships and bourbon preferences. The reality hit me on my first day. The executive floor was a sea of gray suits and graying hair, broken only by the occasional young woman carrying coffee or taking notes. In meetings, my ideas would float into the air, ignored, only to resurface 10 minutes later from a male colleague's mouth to thunderous approval. I learned to document everything, to send follow-up emails with timestamps, to create paper trails that proved my contributions existed. But I adapted. I had to. That's what survivors do. The strategy development department where I worked was a pressure cooker of ambition and barely concealed animosity. 23 analysts and specialists, all fighting for the 3 senior positions that might open up once every 2 years. We smiled at each other in the break room while calculating each other's weaknesses. We collaborated on projects while keeping our best insights hidden. It was corporate warfare dressed in business casual. My workspace reflected my approach: organized, efficient, impenetrable, while others decorated with family photos and motivational posters. My desk held only essentials: 3 monitors, a locked filing cabinet, and a small cactus that required minimal care but refused to die. Much like me, I'd earned my reputation through results. The Morrison acquisition strategy that saved the company $3 million. The risk assessment model that prevented a catastrophic investment in a failing crypto venture. The competitive analysis that identified a market gap worth 8 figures. Each success was a brick in the wall I was building around my position, making myself indispensable. Yet for all my achievements, I remained an outsider. The boys' club operated on unwritten rules I could observe but never fully join. Promotions were discussed over whiskey at Martinez's Steakhouse, not in performance reviews. Real decisions were made on Saturday golf courses, not Monday morning meetings. I could outwork them, outthink them, outperform them, but I couldn't out-network them in spaces where I wasn't welcome. That's why Project Horizon meant everything. It wasn't just another initiative to pad my resume. It was my shot at forcing their hand, at creating something so undeniably valuable that they'd have no choice but to recognize it, to recognize me. As I stood in my office that morning, looking out at the city 23 floors below, I allowed myself a moment of dangerous hope. The presentation was in 3 weeks. The numbers were bulletproof. The strategy was revolutionary. I didn't know that in this very building, in an office 3 doors down, someone was already planning to destroy it all. Project Horizon began as a whisper of an idea during a late-night data analysis session 18 months ago. I'd been reviewing our client retention metrics when I noticed a pattern everyone else had missed. A correlation between transaction timing patterns and customer lifetime value that could revolutionize how we approached financial predictions. My hands trembled as I ran the numbers again and again. The potential was staggering, a predictive algorithm that could increase our profit margins by 30%, translating to $10 million in the first year alone. I spent 6 months building the framework in secret, working weekends and holidays when the office was empty. Every line of code, every statistical model, every market projection was mine. I'd learned the hard way that premature disclosure meant watching others take credit for your innovations. This time would be different. This time, I'd present a fully formed masterpiece that couldn't be stolen or diluted. The algorithm was elegant in its complexity, a neural network that learned from millions of microtransactions to predict customer behavior with 94% accuracy. It could identify high-value clients before they even knew they'd become high-value. It could flag risks while they were still microscopic. It was the kind of breakthrough that careers were built on, the kind that got featured in TechCrunch and the Wall Street Journal. When I finally revealed Project Horizon to senior management, the room fell silent. Even Harrison Blackwood, our notoriously skeptical CEO, leaned forward in his chair. The CFO actually smiled, a phenomenon rarer than a Denver snowstorm in July. For 20 minutes, I owned that boardroom, walking them through projections that seemed almost too good to be true. "How long until implementation?" Blackwood asked. 3 months for full deployment, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've already completed the beta testing phase with historical data. We're ready for live trials." The approval came with unprecedented resources, a dedicated team of 5 developers, a testing budget that made my previous projects look like lemonade stands, direct reporting to the board, bypassing 2 levels of middle management. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed nights and weekends and relationships to achieve. But success at Valoris Systems was like blood in shark-infested waters. The announcement of Project Horizon sent ripples through the department. Suddenly, colleagues who'd ignored me for years wanted coffee meetings. People who'd forgotten my name remembered my birthday. Everyone wanted to be associated with the project that had the CEO's attention. The pressure was crushing. $10 million wasn't just a number. It was a promise I'd made to the most powerful people in the company. Every day brought new challenges. Integration issues with legacy systems, resistance from departments that felt threatened by automation, competitors sniffing around our developments. I averaged 4 hours of sleep a night, sustained by ambition and dangerous amounts of caffeine. My team worked with the devotion of true believers. Marcus, a brilliant developer who'd been overlooked for promotion 3 times, coded like his life depended on it. Sarah, a data analyst who'd been relegated to grunt work despite her PhD, crafted visualizations that made complex mathematics look like art. We were the outsiders, the overlooked, and Project Horizon was our collective vindication. The testing phase exceeded every projection. Our pilot program, with a subset of premium clients, showed a 32% increase in profitability within just 6 weeks. The algorithm identified 17 high-risk accounts that would have cost us millions in losses. It predicted market microtrends 3 days before our competitors' systems. We weren't just meeting expectations, we were shattering them. I documented everything meticulously. Every decision, every breakthrough, every setback was recorded in our secure project database. Triple redundancy backups, encrypted files, access logs that tracked every view and modification. I'd learned to be paranoid in this environment where success made you a target. 2 weeks before the final presentation, I could taste victory. The slides were perfect, each one a testament to months of brutal work. The live demonstration was flawless, the algorithm performing like a trained symphony. The ROI calculations were conservative, yet still showed returns that would make us the darlings of the next shareholders' meeting. That night, I allowed myself to imagine the afterwards. The promotion to senior vice president. The bonus that would finally let me buy my mother a real house. The respect that would replace the condescension I'd endured for years. The power to finally change things for the women who'd come after me. Standing in the empty office at midnight, looking at Project Horizon's dashboard glowing on my monitors. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Pure, dangerous, intoxicating hope. I should have known better. At Valoris Systems, hope was just another vulnerability to be exploited. Ethan Caldwell had been my direct manager for 8 months, promoted to Director of Strategic Development through connections I could only guess at. He was everything Valoris Systems loved. 43, Harvard MBA, member of the Denver Athletic Club, and possessed of that particular brand of casual cruelty that passed for leadership in corporate America. He'd arrived at my office that Tuesday afternoon with his signature smirk and a paper cup of overpriced coffee. "Rachel, we need to discuss resource allocation," he said, settling into my guest chair without invitation. His eyes scanned my monitors, lingering on the Project Horizon dashboard. "The board's been asking questions about server costs." "The server costs were approved 3 months ago," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "We're actually 15% under budget." "Yes? Well, priorities change." He stood, walking behind my desk to peer at my screens. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and oppressive. "Mind if I take a look at the system architecture? Need to understand what we're spending on." It was a reasonable request from a manager. I logged him into the administrative portal, showing him the infrastructure we'd built. He nodded, asked a few technical questions, then suggested I take a break. "You look tired, Rachel. Why don't you grab some lunch? I'll finish reviewing this." I should have known. God, I should have known. But I was tired, exhausted. Really. And Ethan had never shown particular interest in my work before, always preferring to take credit from a comfortable distance. I locked my personal workstation and left, spending 40 minutes in the cafeteria picking at a salad while reviewing presentation notes on my phone. When I returned, Ethan was gone. My screens showed the normal desktop. Nothing seemed amiss until I tried to access the Project Horizon repository. Access denied. Resource not found. My stomach dropped. I tried again. Same error. I pulled up the backup servers, empty. The development environment, wiped clean. 18 months of work. Algorithms worth $10 million. The dreams and efforts of my entire team, gone. My hands shook as I checked the system logs. There it was, timestamp 3:47 p.m. Full repository deletion authorized by E. Caldwell. Reason, resource reallocation per executive directive. I called Marcus first. His voice broke when he tried to access his code. Sarah actually sobbed over the phone. 5 brilliant people who'd poured their souls into Project Horizon, discovering in real time that everything had been destroyed. I stormed into Ethan's office without knocking. He was on a call. Feet up on his desk, laughing at something. He held up a finger. "Wait," and continued his conversation for another full minute while I stood there. Rage building behind my eyes. "Rachel," he said finally, hanging up. "What can I do for you?" "You deleted Project Horizon." "I reorganized our server allocation. The infrastructure was being underutilized." That infrastructure contained 18 months of development, $10 million in projected revenue. You destroyed everything. He shrugged, that dismissive, casual shrug that said my crisis was barely worth his attention. "If it was that important, you should have had better backups. Besides, the board is pivoting to blockchain initiatives. Your little project was yesterday's news." My little project was approved by Harrison Blackwood personally. The final presentation is in 2 weeks. Was approved, was in 2 weeks. He leaned back, hands behind his head. I've already informed Harrison that we're reallocating resources. Told him the project hit insurmountable technical challenges. Better to cut our losses now than embarrass ourselves with a failed presentation. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't incompetence or ignorance. This was deliberate sabotage. You're threatened by me. The words came out as a whisper. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Threatened? By you? Rachel, you're a diversity hire who got lucky with a few good guesses. I'm doing you a favor. This way, you fail quietly instead of spectacularly in front of the board. I have documentation. Every approval, every metric. Had documentation. It was all on the servers I cleaned up. He stood, moving toward the door. Look, take the rest of the week off. Process this disappointment. When you come back, we'll find you something more appropriate, maybe something in compliance, less pressure, more suitable for someone with your background. My background, the trailer park, the state school, the wrong gender, wrong connections, wrong everything except for the talent and drive that had built something worth millions. This is illegal. It's corporate sabotage. I'll go to HR. With what proof? The word of a disappointed employee against a director with impeccable credentials? Rachel, be smart. Take the loss. Learn from it. He opened his door, a clear dismissal. Oh, and Rachel? If you try to make trouble, remember, I write your performance reviews, I approve your raises, I decide if you have a future here, choose wisely. I walked back to my office in a daze. Through the windows, Denver stretched out below, indifferent to my catastrophe. 18 months of work, deleted in seconds. $10 million in revenue, erased by a man who couldn't even understand the code he'd destroyed. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the error message where my life's work used to be, something shifted inside me. The despair crystallized into something harder, sharper. Ethan Caldwell thought he'd ended me. He had no idea what he'd actually started. The aftermath was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. Within 48 hours, the narrative had been rewritten. Project Horizon hadn't been sabotaged. It had failed to meet technical benchmarks. I hadn't been betrayed. I had overestimated my capabilities. The $10 million wasn't lost. It was never truly achievable. Harrison Blackwood wouldn't return my calls. His assistant, who'd always greeted me warmly, now looked through me like I was furniture. The CFO who'd smiled at my presentation passed me in the hallway without acknowledgement. I'd gone from rising star to cautionary tale in less than a week. The formal review came on Friday. Ethan had prepared a comprehensive report detailing my project mismanagement. According to his fiction, I'd overpromised, underdelivered, and when faced with impending failure, had attempted to blame system errors for my incompetence. The meeting included 2 HR representatives, both taking notes with practiced neutrality. We're concerned about your emotional response to standard resource reallocation, Ethan said, his voice dripping with false concern. Perhaps the pressure has been too much? You deleted 18 months of work, I stated flatly. There's that hostility again. He sighed, glancing at HR. Rachel, no one deleted anything. The servers were reallocated after your project data was corrupted due to poor architecture. If anything, I saved the company from further embarrassment. The HR manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd once told me she admired my tenacity, shuffled her papers. Ms. Donovan, we need to discuss your future here. This failure, combined with your aggressive response to management decisions, raises concerns. What are you saying? We're placing you on a performance improvement plan. 60 days to demonstrate you can handle your responsibilities without creating hostile work environment. A PIP, the corporate kiss of death. Everyone knew that PIPs weren't about improvement. They were about documentation for eventual termination. 60 days to find a new job before being fired for cause, destroying my references and reputation. My team scattered like leaves in a storm. Marcus was transferred to the blockchain division under someone who'd never appreciate his brilliance. Sarah was moved to basic reporting, her PhD worthless in a role meant for junior analysts. The others were reassigned to projects designed to bury their talents under mundane busy work. We were being systematically erased. The Whisper campaign started immediately. Rachel Donovan had crashed and burned, got too ambitious, flew too close to the sun. Typical story. Woman gets big opportunity, can't handle the pressure. By Monday, I was radioactive. Colleagues who'd sought my mentorship now avoided the break room when I entered. Lunch invitations dried up. Even the security guard stopped making small talk. My mother called that Tuesday night. Somehow, she always knew. "Baby, you sound different. What's wrong?" I couldn't tell her. Couldn't explain that her daughter, the one who'd escaped, who'd made it, was facing the same brutal dismissal she'd endured her whole life. "Just work stuff. Mom, it's fine." Rachel Marie Donovan, don't you lie to me. I know that voice. The tears came then, silent and bitter. They destroyed me. Mom, I did everything right, and they destroyed me anyway. "Then you destroy them right back," she said, fierce as prairie fire. "You're my daughter. We don't stay down. We get up, we get even, and we get gone." But getting even seemed impossible. Ethan had covered his tracks perfectly. The system logs had been mysteriously corrupted. The backup servers showed no record of ever containing Project Horizon data. Even my personal files had been sanitized. Someone had accessed my workstation after hours and removed every trace of my documentation. I discovered the depth of the conspiracy when I ran into James from IT in the parking garage. He looked around nervously before speaking. "I can't say much, but you should know. This wasn't just Ethan. He had help. High-level help. Your project threatened someone's bonus structure, someone way above Ethan." "Who?" "Can't say. But Rachel, stop digging. They've already decided you're gone. Don't make it worse." That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the Denver skyline. Somewhere in those lights was Valoris Systems, where people were already forgetting Project Horizon had ever existed. The algorithm that could have revolutionized our industry was gone, replaced by whatever blockchain nonsense would justify executive bonuses this quarter. My laptop contained fragments, personal notes, early sketches, theoretical frameworks that predated the official project. Not enough to rebuild, but enough to prove I hadn't imagined it all. I backed everything up to 3 separate cloud services, encrypted and hidden. Evidence of what had been, even if it couldn't restore what was lost. The worst part was the isolation. In corporate America, failure is contagious. Former allies treated me like I had a disease they might catch. My reputation, built through years of excellent work, had been dismantled in days. The glass ceiling I'd been trying to crack had turned into a glass coffin, transparent and suffocating. By the second week of my PIP, Ethan had moved into the larger corner office previously reserved for Project Horizon's expansion. He'd hung his Harvard diploma where my whiteboard had been. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me through the glass walls, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. The company lost the $10 million, but they'd never admit it. The board was told that the project had been a minor experiment, terminated early due to strategic pivoting. The truth was buried under corporate speak and careful documentation. But in that darkness, in that profound professional death, something else was born. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd slink away. Another casualty of corporate warfare. They never considered that survival had been bred into my bones, that I'd learned to fight dirty long before I learned to fight fair. The plan began with a single thread I'd noticed while reviewing my old emails at 2 a.m. on a sleepless Thursday. Ethan had forwarded Project Horizon's technical specifications to his personal Gmail account 3 weeks before he deleted everything. Sloppy. But that sloppiness told me something crucial. He wasn't as careful as he thought he was. I started digging with the methodical patience of an archaeologist. Every email Ethan had sent in the past year, every project he'd overseen, every budget he'd approved. The picture that emerged was fascinating in its corruption. Project Horizon wasn't his first victim, just his most ambitious. 3 other initiatives had mysteriously failed under his management, each time with the project lead leaving the company shortly after. The pattern was clear, but patterns weren't proof. I needed evidence that would stand up to scrutiny, documentation that couldn't be dismissed as the ravings of a disgruntled employee. So I became a ghost in my own workplace, staying late when the floors were empty. Arriving early when only security roamed the halls. The first breakthrough came from the printer logs. Ethan had printed something from my workstation 12 minutes after deleting Project Horizon, the complete source code and financial projections. Physical copies that IT couldn't track, that he could claim as his own work when the heat died down. He was planning to resurrect my project under his name, probably in 6 months when everyone had forgotten about the failed original. But the real goldmine was his expense reports. Ethan had been falsifying them for 2 years, billing personal luxuries as client entertainment. The ski trip to Aspen, listed as a strategic planning retreat with clients who'd never left their Manhattan offices. The $3,000 watches. Employee retention gifts for team members who'd confirmed they'd never received them. Small corruptions, but they added up to nearly $200,000 in fraud. I documented everything meticulously, creating encrypted backups of my findings. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed allies, and I found them in unexpected places. Patricia from HR, who delivered my PIP with dead eyes, approached me in the parking garage one evening. "I know what happened wasn't right," she said quietly. "I can't help officially, but..." Ethan's previous assistant filed a sealed complaint before she left. Sexual harassment? HR buried it, but the file still exists. Marcus, despite his transfer, hadn't given up. He'd been quietly documenting the blockchain project's failures, which Ethan was desperately trying to hide. "He doesn't understand the technology," Marcus told me over encrypted messages. "He's making promises that will cost the company millions when they fall through." Sarah had found something even more damning. "Remember when Ethan took credit for the Morrison acquisition strategy?" she asked during a carefully coordinated coffee run. "I found the original files. They're time-stamped 6 hours after you submitted yours. He literally copied your work and resubmitted it as his own." The security vulnerability was the crown jewel. While reviewing system logs I still had access to, I discovered that Ethan had been sharing his administrative credentials with an external consultant, his college roommate who ran a competing firm. They'd been feeding our proprietary data to competitors for months, a breach that could trigger lawsuits from every major client we had. I cross-referenced everything, building a case that would be undeniable. But I needed to be strategic about deployment. Going to HR would get me fired immediately. They'd already shown their allegiance. The board was too insulated, too removed from daily operations to care about middle management corruption unless it affected them directly. Then I remembered something James from IT had said. "Your project threatened someone's bonus structure." I pulled up the executive compensation plans, publicly available in our SEC filings. There it was. The senior executives' bonuses were tied to cost reduction, not revenue generation. Project Horizon would have made the company $10 million, but would have required infrastructure investment that would temporarily reduce their quarterly bonuses. Ethan wasn't working alone. He was a weapon wielded by someone higher up, someone who'd rather destroy innovation than accept a smaller bonus. The conspiracy went deeper than personal jealousy. It was systemic rot. I started building profiles on every executive, looking for the weakest link, the one most vulnerable to scandal. Richard Steinberg, the chief operations officer, was going through a messy divorce. His wife's lawyer would be very interested in those hidden asset transfers I'd discovered. Monica Liu, head of compliance, had overlooked the security breaches that would destroy her reputation if exposed. Harrison Blackwood himself had signed off on budget allocations that didn't match actual expenditures. Plausible deniability unless someone connected the dots. The plan crystallized over 3 weeks of 18-hour days. I wouldn't just expose Ethan, I'd reveal the entire network of corruption that had enabled him. But it had to be done perfectly, all at once, with no opportunity for them to close ranks and spin the narrative. I created multiple copies of everything, stored in different locations, some physical, some digital, all encrypted. Dead man switches were set up. If I disappeared or was suddenly terminated, everything would automatically release to journalists, regulatory bodies, and keyboard members who weren't implicated. My PIP review was in 10 days. They expected me to be broken, apologetic, desperately trying to salvage my career. Instead, I was preparing to burn their entire kingdom down. The girl from the trailer park had learned something they never expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. Sometimes it's making sure that those who try to destroy you lose everything they used against you. The chess pieces were in place. Now I just had to decide when to topple the king. The art of corporate destruction lies in timing and misdirection. While Ethan watched me for signs of desperation, I gave him exactly what he expected: a broken woman trying to salvage her career. I arrived early, stayed late, and submitted weekly PIP reports filled with corporate buzzwords and false contrition. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating his downfall with surgical precision. My first move was establishing contact with Jennifer Walsh, a senior reporter at the Denver Business Journal who'd been investigating Valoris Systems for months. We met at a coffee shop in Boulder, 30 miles from anyone who might recognize us. "I've been tracking irregularities in your company's financial reporting," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "But I need an inside source." "What if I could give you something bigger than financial irregularities?" I replied. "What if I could prove systematic fraud, security breaches, and the deliberate sabotage of a $10 million project?" Her eyes sharpened. "I'd need bulletproof documentation." "You'll have it, but the timing has to be perfect." The second thread involved the audit committee. Valoris Systems' annual audit was scheduled for next month, and Ernst & Young would be examining everything. I anonymously forwarded specific transactions for them to investigate: Ethan's expense reports, the unusual server purchases that preceded Project Horizon's deletion, the consulting fees paid to his roommate's company, breadcrumbs that would lead them deeper into the maze. Sarah proved invaluable in the technical documentation. Working after hours, she'd recovered fragments of Project Horizon from archived test servers that Ethan didn't know existed. Not enough to rebuild the project, but enough to prove it had been real, revolutionary, and deliberately destroyed. She also found something extraordinary. Ethan had tried to file a patent application for my algorithm 2 days after deleting it, using technical descriptions he'd printed from my workstation. Marcus created a hidden program that tracked Ethan's digital footprints. Every unauthorized access, every suspicious file transfer, every communication with competitors was logged and backed up. "He's getting sloppy," Marcus reported. "He thinks he's won, so he's not covering his tracks anymore." The client angle required delicate handling. I reached out to David Morrison, CEO of Morrison Financial, whose acquisition we'd handled the previous year. We'd developed a respectful relationship during that deal, and he'd specifically requested I lead his account team. "David, I need to make you aware of a security breach that may have compromised your data," I said during a carefully scripted call from a burner phone. "What kind of breach?" "Your proprietary information may have been shared with Pinnacle Associates, his primary competitor, the one trying to poach his biggest clients." The silence was deafening. Then, "How do you know this?" "I can't reveal everything yet, but you should have your security team review any strategic changes Pinnacle has made in the last 6 months. And David, you might want to reconsider your contract renewal with Valoris next month." The beauty of corporate paranoia is how quickly it spreads. Within days, 3 other major clients were asking questions about data security. The board started getting nervous calls from investors. Stock prices began to wobble. Patricia from HR became my most unexpected ally. She'd been documenting not just Ethan's harassment complaint, but a pattern of discrimination throughout the company. "I've been here 12 years, she told me during a clandestine meeting in the stairwell. "I've watched them destroy dozens of talented women and minorities. I'm done being complicit." She provided me with something invaluable: the real reason Project Horizon was destroyed. An email chain between Ethan and Robert Collins, the CFO, explicitly discussing how the project's success would set dangerous precedents for compensation expectations and disrupt existing power structures. They'd planned my failure before I'd even presented to the board. I started leaving strategic breadcrumbs for Ethan to find. A printed email about interview preparations left on the printer. A recruiting firm's business card visible on my desk. Browser history showing job sites, carefully curated for IT monitoring. I wanted him to think I was beaten, job hunting, ready to disappear quietly. He took the bait completely. I heard him laughing with Robert Collins in the executive lounge. She's updating her LinkedIn profile. Give her 2 weeks, and she'll slink back to whatever Midwest hole she crawled out of. What they didn't know was that I'd been in contact with 3 board members who weren't part of the inner circle. Eleanor Hastings, who'd built her fortune in tech and had zero tolerance for fraud. James Chen, whose own daughter had faced similar discrimination in finance. Gregory Watts, who'd been suspicious of the blockchain pivot from the beginning. Each received a carefully curated package of evidence. Not enough to act on immediately, but enough to ensure they'd ask the right questions when the time came. The final piece involved Ethan's college roommate, Bradley Morse. A little investigation revealed he was under SEC investigation for insider trading at his previous firm. One anonymous tip about his current activities with Valoris Data. And suddenly Bradley was very interested in making a deal with prosecutors. Everything was converging toward the quarterly board meeting in 8 days. Ethan would be presenting the blockchain project's progress, or lack thereof. The audit committee would be delivering their preliminary findings, and I would be completing my 60-day PIP review, where they expected to fire me quietly. But I had one more card to play. During my investigation, I discovered that Ethan had been having an affair with Monica Liu from compliance, the same Monica Liu who'd signed off on overlooking the security breaches. Their text messages, carelessly synced to his work iPad, revealed not just their relationship, but their explicit discussions about covering up his fraudulent activities. As I sat in my office that Friday evening, watching Ethan chat with executives in the conference room, I felt the cold satisfaction of a trap about to spring. He raised his glass in a mock toast when he caught me looking, that same dismissive smirk from the day he'd destroyed my life's work. Enjoy it, I thought. It's the last toast you'll ever make at Valoris Systems. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp on a crisp Denver morning. I arrived at 7:30, dressed in my sharpest suit, the one I'd bought with my first bonus, saved for occasions that demanded armor. Security nodded as I badged in, unaware they were witnessing the beginning of the end. By 8:45, the boardroom was filling with executives and board members. Ethan strutted in with Robert Collins, both radiating the confidence of men who believed themselves untouchable. Monica Liu sat across from them, studiously avoiding eye contact with Ethan, though not carefully enough to hide the nervous glance they shared. Harrison Blackwood called the meeting to order. The agenda was routine: financial reviews, project updates, strategic planning. My PIP review was buried at the end, a formality before my expected termination. They had no idea I'd transformed it into the main event. Ethan presented first, his blockchain initiative slideshow full of promises and projections with no substance. The board nodded along until Eleanor Hastings interrupted. Mr. Caldwell, these projections seem optimistic. What's your actual progress to date? Ethan stumbled, throwing out technical jargon he didn't understand. Marcus had been right. The project was a disaster, hemorrhaging money while producing nothing viable. Then Gregory Watts spoke up. I've been reviewing some unusual patterns in our resource allocation, specifically the sudden termination of Project Horizon. Can someone explain why we abandoned a $10 million opportunity? Technical failures, Ethan said quickly. The project lead overpromised. Actually, I said, standing from my seat in the back, I'd like to address that during my review, if the board permits. Blackwood frowned. Ms. Donovan, your review is scheduled. With respect, sir, my review is directly relevant to Mr. Caldwell's presentation and Mr. Watts's question. Eleanor Hastings leaned forward. I'd like to hear this. Proceed. Ms. Donovan. I walked to the front, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. My hands were steady as I pulled up my first slide. Project Horizon, a case study in corporate sabotage. The room erupted. Ethan shot to his feet. This is inappropriate. She's a disgruntled employee. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell, Eleanor said coldly. Let her speak. I began with the facts. The original Project Horizon specifications, the successful test results, the $10 million projections backed by hard data. Then I showed the deletion logs, Ethan's administrative access, the timestamp of destruction. These are fabricated, Ethan protested. Actually, I said, clicking to the next slide. They're verified by 3 independent sources, including our external backup service that Mr. Caldwell didn't know existed. I presented the patent application he'd filed using my algorithm. 2 days after claiming the project had failed. The room grew colder with each slide. Then came the expense fraud, receipts, falsified reports, $200,000 in stolen funds documented with forensic precision. Monica Liu went pale when I revealed the security breaches, Bradley Morse's involvement, the leaked client data, the SEC investigation that was already underway. But the most damaging revelation, I said, pulling up the email chain between Ethan and Robert Collins, is that this sabotage was deliberate, planned, and executed to protect executive bonuses at the expense of company growth. Robert Collins stood up. This is slander. I'll sue. You'll do nothing, Eleanor Hastings said, her voice like ice. Sit down before you make this worse. I continued relentlessly. The affair between Ethan and Monica Liu, compromising our compliance oversight. The 3 other projects Ethan had sabotaged. The pattern of discrimination Patricia from HR had documented. Each revelation was another nail in their coffins. Jennifer Walsh's article had gone live that morning, timed perfectly. Board members' phones began buzzing with alerts. Valoris Systems insider reveals massive fraud. Our stock price was already dropping. The audit committee has some questions, announced James Chen, who'd been quietly reviewing the evidence I'd sent. Specifically about these consulting fees to Pinnacle Associates. David Morrison's lawsuit had been filed at 8 a.m. 3 other clients had terminated their contracts effective immediately. The carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing in real time. Ethan's face had gone from red to white to gray. You vindictive bitch, he snarled. You've destroyed everything. No, I replied calmly. I've revealed everything you destroyed. Project Horizon, my team's careers, the trust of our clients, $10 million in revenue. Sacrificed for your ego and greed. Harrison Blackwood finally spoke. Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Liu, Mr. Collins, you're suspended immediately pending investigation. Security will escort you out. You can't, Ethan started. Actually, he can, Eleanor Hastings said. And as of this morning's emergency vote, Mr. Blackwood. You're also under review for negligent oversight. The board will be conducting a complete leadership restructuring. Security arrived as Ethan lunged toward me, held back only by their intervention. You've ruined me, he screamed as they dragged him out. You've ruined everything. You ruined yourself, I said quietly. I just documented it. The boardroom was chaos, but Eleanor Hastings' voice cut through. Ms. Donovan, please stay. We need to discuss your future here. With respect, I said, gathering my laptop. I don't have a future here. My resignation is effective immediately. But we need you to clean up your mess, to rebuild what you let him destroy. No, I've accepted a position as CTO at a startup that actually values innovation. They're offering me equity, autonomy, and most importantly, respect. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Project Horizon's algorithm, I rebuilt it from memory. My new company will launch it next quarter. We're projecting $20 million in first-year revenue. That could have been yours. The last thing I saw was Harrison Blackwood's face, finally understanding the true cost of what they'd allowed. Ethan hadn't just deleted a project. He'd deleted Valoris Systems' future. Outside, Denver's morning sun felt warm on my face. My phone buzzed with messages from Marcus, Sarah, and the others. They'd watched the live stream I'd secretly broadcast to them. Justice might be cold, but it was exactly what they'd needed to see. Ethan Caldwell thought he'd erased me with a keystroke. Instead, he'd freed me to build something better. And his destruction? That was just the beginning of his fall. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within 72 hours, Ethan Caldwell's name had become toxic in Denver's business community. The SEC investigation expanded into a full criminal probe. His assets were frozen. His wife filed for divorce after learning about Monica Liu. The Harvard MBA he'd wielded like a weapon couldn't save him from federal fraud charges that would likely result in 5 to 10 years in prison. Robert Collins tried to negotiate a plea deal, offering to testify against Ethan in exchange for leniency. Monica Liu lost her compliance certifications and faced her own criminal charges. The dominoes fell one by one, each revelation pulling more corruption into the light. Valora Systems stock crashed 40% before trading was halted. Harrison Blackwood was forced to resign in disgrace. The company that had seemed so imposing, so unshakable, was gutted from within by the very rot it had cultivated. 3 months later, it would be acquired by a competitor for a fraction of its former value. But I wasn't watching the collapse from the outside. I had already moved forward. My new company, Ascent Technologies, was everything Valora Systems had pretended to be. We launched Project Horizon, now called Phoenix, to immediate market success. $20 million in revenue the first year proved conservative. We hit $30 million. Marcus and Sarah joined me as founding engineers, finally valued for their brilliance. Even Patricia from HR came aboard, building a culture where talent mattered more than connections. 6 months after that boardroom confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor Hastings. She'd led the board's restructuring of Valora Systems and wanted to meet. We had coffee in the same Boulder shop where I'd met Jennifer Walsh. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "We failed you. We created an environment where someone like Ethan could thrive while someone like you had to fight for survival." "You did," I agreed simply. "The new Valora Systems would like to license Phoenix. We're prepared to offer $15 million for a 5-year agreement." I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned in those dark weeks after Ethan's betrayal. Phoenix isn't for sale. Not to Valoris. Not ever. That's short-sighted from a business perspective. No, it's justice. Your company had the chance to nurture innovation. Instead, you chose to protect mediocrity and corruption. Now you get to watch while others succeed with what you threw away. She left quietly, understanding that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. A year later, I stood before a packed auditorium at the Women in Technology conference, delivering a keynote about resilience and revenge, the productive kind. I told them about the trailer park in Nebraska, about the library computer that crashed every 30 minutes, about the manager who deleted my future with a shrug. "They'll try to erase you," I said to the eager faces. "They'll try to make you small, to fit you into boxes that make them comfortable. Don't let them. Document everything. Build your networks. And when they try to destroy what you've built, make sure you've already planted the seeds of something better." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. That night, alone in my Denver penthouse, a far cry from the studio apartment where I'd plotted Ethan's downfall, I stood at the window, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Ethan Caldwell was preparing for his sentencing hearing. His LinkedIn profile, once so proud, had been deleted. His name appeared only in cautionary tales and court documents. I'd won. Completely. Devastatingly. Finally. But victory wasn't the warm satisfaction I'd expected. It was quiet, like the morning after a storm. The rage that had fueled me for months had burned away, leaving something cleaner. Not forgiveness, Ethan didn't deserve that, but a kind of release. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw your interview on CNN. Your father would have been proud. Hell, maybe he would have stuck around if he'd known what you'd become." "I became this because he didn't," I replied. The truth was simple. Ethan Caldwell had tried to delete me, but deletions only work if you don't have backups. And I'd been backing myself up my whole life, in determination, in documentation, in the quiet promise that no one would ever erase me again. Looking out at Denver's glittering skyline, I thought about the women who would come after me, who would face their own Ethan Caldwells. My story would be their backup. Proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's making sure those who tried to destroy you are remembered only as footnotes in your victory. The sun would rise tomorrow on a world where Phoenix Technologies was worth 50 million and growing. Where my team was thriving. Where my mother lived in a real house with a garden she'd always dreamed of. Where every morning, I woke up knowing that I hadn't just survived, I'd transcended. And Ethan Caldwell? He was just a deleted file in a system he'd never truly understood. No recovery possible, no backup available. The morning light painted the mountains gold, just like it had that first day at Valoris Systems. But this time, I wasn't watching someone else's empire, I was building my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and ultimate triumph. I'd love to hear where you're listening from, whether it's during your morning commute, late-night wind down, or perhaps even in your own office where you might be facing your own Ethan Caldwell. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced workplace betrayal? How did you overcome it? Let's discuss in the comments.